You're watching Beyond Market. Welcome, I'm Esther Awuni. Many thanks for joining us. On the show today, we'll be taking a look at Nigeria's development priorities ahead of the 2019 elections. As always, you can join the conversation with the hashtag Beyond Market. You can follow my Twitter handle too at Esther O. Awuni. Now, how should Africa's largest economy prioritize its development objectives? Well, today we're putting that question to Mustapha Chike-Obi. He's the Executive Vice Chairman of Alpha African Advisory. He joins me now in the studio. A lot is happening in Nigeria's in the economy and the political space, but we'll start with the economy, where we are right now with the economy. Now, this economy was meant to see growth being anchored on the economic recovery and growth plan of this administration, the APC-led administration. So what we know right now is that growth has slowed. Looking at growth from Q4 2017, 2.1%. Latest figures that we have, still Q1, 1.9%. We're seeing general commerce or the services sector within the GDP components slowing down. That was a bit of a surprise for even the monetary authorities themselves. So I'd like to hear your thoughts in terms of how we've progressed with growth and those indices that were meant to help support growth. We still have higher oil prices. Production is still relatively stable. We have some peace in the Niger Delta. But at the end of the day, we're still not getting that stimulus that we need for growth.
Well, it's when we talk about growth, economic growth, 2%, 3% for me is not growth. It's just a slow march to economic oblivion. So we're getting there slower than we'll get there normally. But 2%, 3% is completely insufficient for a country like Nigeria that has a developmental backlog, an employment backlog, infrastructure deficit. And the only way we can get out of it is by double-digit growth for a long time. I say double-digit growth for 15 years. Any plan that does not envisage double-digit growth for 15 years or more will not get Nigeria out of the mess it's in.
So what could we have done to get, because remember we're coming from a recession, which we came out of luckily quickly. So what could we have done in terms of, because obviously we need to power the engine enough to get that kind of growth, double digits.
Yes.
Look across the world today, you can hardly find that, even in a country like China. But like you said, for a country like Nigeria, perhaps we have what it takes. But what is that? What is it that we're missing?
The countries that are not growing at double digit are countries that have built everything. I mean, China grew at double digit for 15 years, and now they're at 7%. India is at 7%, heading towards double digit again, and they've developed in the period while they were at double digit. So it's not fair. It's like saying somebody is 15 years old and they're growing at half an inch a year, and you compare them to a baby who must grow at 3 or 4 inches a year, but because the stage of growth is different. So for Nigeria, where we're like an economic baby. We need to grow rapidly. And so it's not fair to compare us to America. America has all the roads it needs, all the airports it needs. The US has 10,000 airports. We have maybe 30. So it's not fair to compare a developed country with a growing country in terms of growth. Our growth must be double digit for a long period of time. But what do we do about it? Every economist will tell you there are some good things in the economy that people like to maximize. People like to maximize growth. People like to minimize interest rates. People like to keep their currency stable. People like to minimize inflation. But they're contradictory. You can't have all of them at the same time. What is important is that we have a nation that agrees on what the priorities are. For me, they should be growth and employment. Inflation,
for a country like Nigeria, where
we're right now. So now that means inflation will have to be managed. Inflation will be higher for a period of time. There was a year in which the Chinese inflation was 34%. We'll have to manage inflation, and we have to manage the exchange rate. But the imperatives, in my view, are growth and employment. I'd rather have a fully employed economy where the inflation is at 20% than to have an economy with zero inflation and 20% unemployment. And so we're keeping people out of work. When people are out of work, they don't acquire skills. They're not motivated to be educated because there's no benefit to education. They can't get jobs. They're idle. It breeds crime. It breeds disunity. So I say let's sacrifice what we must to grow our economy and employ our people.
In your opinion, what would you say could be holding the monetary authorities and also the fiscal authorities back? Because if you listen to comments of the MPC, one gets the sense that they're completely averse to inflation at that kind of level. And we know that growth has been sacrificed for that.
Unemployment.
Unemployment.
But let me tell you what I think is wrong with the economic model of Nigeria today. Everybody starts with the fact that we must have Naira stable or Naira appreciating. The thing that bothers me is that the Naira in the last 2 years has appreciated by approximately 25% versus the US dollar in real terms. So when you keep your Naira at the nominal level of 360 versus the dollar, and your inflation is 12% and the inflation in the US is 1%, you are appreciating your currency by 11%, the difference, every year. So foreign goods get cheaper every year versus Nigerian goods. So you discourage Nigerians from manufacturing, you discourage Nigerians from consuming Nigerian goods, you encourage consumption of foreign goods by strengthening your currency, you reduce exports, and you become, it makes more sense to be an importer-exporter. Importer, really. So import-exporter is misnomer in Nigeria. So yes, first of all, the central bank should not be so obsessed with the currency nominal rate. So once you start from there, then other things follow. If you must keep Naira at 360, what follows? You must keep monetary policy tight. You must keep monetary policy tight. Interest rates have to stay high. There's no credit to the economy. There's no manufacturing. There's no growth. There's no employment. So we have an anti-friendly employment policy. We should step back and say to ourselves, we want to focus on growth and employment. And what that means is that we must keep interest rates low. We will deal with inflation. We will deal with exchange rates. Wherever it goes. But that's the best thing for the economy. So it's a matter of changing your focus.
What has been happening so far? And incidentally, as you know, also know, we did have the MPC just recently, and we know that there have been several initiatives, intervention schemes, if you will, by the CBN to boost the real economy, because the banks aren't doing it and the annual budget isn't doing it. The fiscal authorities aren't doing it. I mean, the growth should come from there, but we're not seeing that growth. So the CBN continues on its drive to intervene one way or the other in the economy. The latest now is asking banks to take part of the cash reserve ratio with the CBN, fund projects of up to a 7-year lifespan at 9%. Now, I've spoken to some bankers, and they're not particularly thrilled at that idea. So I'm thinking, how long are we going to keep having these intervention schemes that are not particularly far-reaching in terms of impact? Yes, we've seen some impact in the agriculture sector, where some farmers have been given loans at single digits through the BOI and some other institutions along with the CBN. So that has worked, but the impact hasn't been quite far-reaching. And I'm wondering, are we going to keep continuing on this trajectory? Because every time the MPC still points its fingers back at the fiscal authorities saying, look, growth should come from here, there. We're not seeing, I mean, they need to plug leakages, they need to save for a rainy day, they need to fix the structural imbalances and effects in the economy. But obviously, these are things that take several years, and our budgets are simply too small year in, year out to boost the kind of growth that we need.
The budget is even smaller when you take out the debt service. If you take out debt service from the budget, and people say it's 50% of the budget, I look at revenues, it's more than 50% of revenues. So you're limited in what you can do on the fiscal side. The balance sheet of the fiscal side has been completely destroyed. And I think the fiscal side doesn't have as much flexibility as people think they do. And you can't raise taxes in a recessionary or a slow growth environment, because that's again, anti-growth. So I think that the focus should be on the monetary side. The monetary side should... You're
saying they have more scope to
They certainly have more scope than the... this initiative on the CRR, you see, this is what confuses me. If every bank took advantage of this initiative and took all their money from the CRR and put in these industries at 9% for 7 years, the impact of that would be to reduce interest rates by 2%.
But there's also the fear of default. Many of them are still dealing with, I mean, making provision.
So here's the question we need to ask CBN. Since the impact, if it works perfectly, is to reduce interest rates by 2%, why don't you reduce the MPR by 2%, which is a better, but they can't, because they're afraid if they do that, No matter what they tell you about inflation, their real fear that if they reduce MPR by 2%, that the Naira, it'd be difficult for them to keep the Naira at 360.
But would there even be that immediate? Because I've also spoken to some analysts who believe that even 1%, 200 basis points wouldn't have that immediate, when it trickles down, it wouldn't feel the effect.
If they say it won't feel the effect, which is what people say, then why raise it? If raising it has an impact, then lowering it must have the opposite impact. So when they were raising it, they're raising it because they felt it will have an impact. So we can't, when we're raising interest rates, say raising interest rates will do the ABC, and then when it's time to lower interest rates, we'll say lower interest rates won't have an impact.
Many times when we're raising interest rates, we have our eyes on the FPIs. We don't want the foreign money to leave. We want to keep the hot money here. You
want to keep hot money here because you don't want your... Look, if the Naira tomorrow was at 500, theoretically, a lot of money will come in. So keeping the Naira at an artificially high level does not... Yes, it may keep some money in, but it doesn't allow... It keep money from going out. It doesn't allow money to come in. So, but I think that this focus on the nominal rate of the Naira is the biggest problem to our development economically in Nigeria today. We must, and I know every time I say this, the middle class hates me. I was on TV the other day and everybody called me and said, oh, leave the Naira alone.
That you're talking about us having this multiple
we should let
different segments.
We should let the Naira go to such a level that it discourages foreign consumption and encourages local consumption.
But do you think that in this time that we live in, many, like you say, you mentioned, I mean, it obviously turn out to be an unpopular government policy, which has, implications for the political scene, where we're heading towards another election. Nobody wants to not be elected. They wants to be elected again. So I'm just thinking many times we cannot even separate the economic matters from politics, because we want to take one particular action. It's deemed an unpopular policy that could have negative impact on certain political ambitions.
It is almost impossible to rescue a sick economy or a sick person from their situation without doing something that appears unpopular to the person. Cancer, for example, is treated by giving you generally either radiation or a cocktail of poisons. Very tough. So it's a tough regimen, but that's the only way to save you, to kill the cancer cells. China had an unpopular policy of one family, one child, which was brutal, but it helped them. So anybody that's telling you that you can do popular things and get this economy out of where it is just kidding you. What the leadership has to do is to have a clear vision of where they want to take us. Tell us what the cost of that is, what sacrifices we have to make, all of us as a nation. They themselves should be prepared to make those sacrifices. Again, I tell the story. In my experiences in the US, you will see the Harvard University president walking around the campus by himself. His budget is more than the budget of the entire Southwest zone. But you see a governor from the Southwest, and you see the paraphernalia around him, and it's unsustainable. So the leaders have to make sacrifices. There's nothing wrong with governors and presidents flying in Nigeria, flying economy, flying commercial like the rest of us. We must stop this notion that because you're a governor, you must have 30 or 40 cars following you around and all those things. So, yes, if our leaders make the sacrifices, we will make the sacrifices too.
Mustapha, we'll take a quick break and we'll come back and pick up from where we left off. Thank you for your time so far. I've been speaking to Mustapha Chike-Obi, Executive Vice Chairman at Alpha African Advisory. We're continuing our focus on Nigeria's development priorities. Still with me in the studio is Mustapha Chike-Obi. He's Executive Vice Chairman at Alpha African Advisory. Mustapha, thank you for your time so far. We're talking about Nigeria's budget and its inability to help stimulate the kind of growth that we need. And you're saying that there are actually ways that we can actually increase the size of this budget. Tell us about that.
Well, if you look at the budget objectively, and since we import 70–80% of what we consume, the budget of 9.1 trillion is actually less in dollar terms than the budget of 2014. So it's not an expansionary budget in terms of the size of this in real terms, in real foreign exchange. And when you add inflation to that, you see that the budget is actually not as high as it used to be. So you can't expect any expansion from the budget. But there are ways in which to, again, if I was in government today, I think the budget should be about 20 trillion naira.
How do we achieve 20 trillion? I mean, we floated some 1 or 2 euro bonds, and I don't know, we still need more money.
Okay, here's how you fund it. The Nigerian balance sheet, as far as I know it, if you exclude AMCON, the guarantees issued by the federal government to date are less than 5% of the GDP. In the US, which is a developed country, guarantees issued by the government come to about 80% of GDP. If Nigerian government created a mechanism for responsibly giving guarantees to infrastructure projects, so all the capital projects are funded through guarantees, and we were even responsible enough to make the guarantees 30% of GDP, you release up to 30 trillion naira for infrastructure development.
From what, foreign sources? From the private capital?
Yes. Once you give the guarantees, it's now up to the other foreigners and private sector. Foreign capital will come in based on those guarantees to fund this project. But government has been strangely reluctant to embark on a guarantee program. It's very, very simple to do. There are people who know how to do it. India did it. China did it. The US does it. Every developed country has used guarantees.
Why do you think we haven't done it? I'm trying to imagine, I mean, perhaps somebody on the economic team surely must have thought about that and brought it up at one of the FEC meetings.
Let me tell you the biggest divide in Nigeria today. It's not North-South and it's not Christian-Muslim. It's labels. Nigerians believe that if you're APC, you're good, you're smart, you're intelligent, you're honest. But if you're PDP or associated with PDP, whatever you say shouldn't be listened to. And because we don't have this excess of intellectual capacity, it has cost us a lot of money. There are a lot of good ideas that were started during the PDP administration that have been thrown away because they're all thieves and bad people. So this idea I've mentioned to you, unless you can find an APC sponsor to take it up, nobody's going to take it seriously. But there's no question that the only way to fund our infrastructure is by government issuing guarantees. It does many things. A, it reduces debt service. It reduces direct borrowing by the government. And this is an idea that has been mooted. And for some reason, nobody in the government is taking it seriously.
It has never come up. And how is it different from the usual, I mean, the public-private partnerships that we usually have, I mean, on some key infrastructure projects in the country?
Because the government is reluctant to issue guarantees. Very reluctant.
Why would the government be reluctant to issue guarantees?
You'll have to ask the fiscal authorities. You have a platform, you have a program, you can ask them directly. But if you want to see the numbers, I can assure you that 30 trillion in the next 3 years can be released through guarantees for capital projects. Okay,
now we have a 2019 election coming just ahead of us, and it's also this, as we draw closer, and I think even now, it has become an ideal time to begin to take stock of how in the last 4 years this economy has thrived or has progressed, how many jobs have been created, what kind of infrastructure projects have been built, and how the general well-being of the Nigerian has improved in the last 4 years. And I know there are a lot of conversations are actually already up and running on that. So what are your thoughts in terms of looking back in the last 4 years as we head into possibly another dispensation, how this economy has fared generally in terms of job growth, and do you think that we had the best of strategy? Remember, I said it's all been anchored on economic recovery and growth plan.
Well, like I say, it is indisputable that the country has not done well in the last 3 years.
Do you think the strategy is faulty, the economic recovery and growth plan? Or
Well,
we just need more time, because that's what some of the fiscal officials tell us. We need more time. We're coming out of a recession. We need at least, well, even beyond 8 years. Obviously, 4 years cannot do the trick. We've had 16 years of slow growth too. No, relatively. Yes, we did 7% at some point, but like you say, it still wasn't the double digit.
It was not the double digit
that we're looking for.
Yes. What I'm saying is that if you look at the ERGP, Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, even their objectives are too modest for me. They're hoping to get to 7% GDP by 2021 or 2022. That's not acceptable to me. So even the objectives of the plan, I will have an issue with. But I think the plan was properly made. If you go back to the 2020 plan that was initiated by Abacha, that's probably the best economic document Nigeria has produced. I mean, obviously we didn't get to the targets there, but I think that plan can be dusted off and revived and updated. And I think that that's the best economic plan we have ever come up with in this country. ERGP for me is aspirational, and it's okay, but it's not what's going to drive us forward. But going back to the last 3 years, like I say, everybody will agree the last 3 years have been terrible economically. There's no economic index that's better today than it was in 2015. It's sure things got a lot worse, and they're coming back to less worse. But everything is worse.
Okay, now we're going, like I said, just a few months away, the elections, and now it looks like the political scene has taken the front seat. Share with us how you see things panning out. Do you think that there's a real danger here now that it appears that the economy may have taken a back seat? I mean, we watch on our television sets every day how the political scene continues, one dramatic event to another, and we're wondering what's going to happen to the economy.
Let me tell you what I hope. There's nothing we can say that will trump political expediency in the next 6-9 months. People will do things that are politically expedient, and so the governance and the economy will suffer. What you will hear is a lot of propaganda, a lot of people bragging about what they've done and what they haven't done, but that's natural. It happens in every country in the world, and we must expect it. But let me tell you what I hope. I hope that the people that we put forward are subjected this time to a rigorous examination. I hope that the presidential candidates will have policy debates. I hope they will take seriously the fact that if Nigeria continues the way it is, there will be no Nigeria 10, 15, 20 years from now. I think they should take it very seriously that their children and their grandchildren need a country to live in. We're too many to be dispersed. We're not a small country that can be dispersed. So if they take all those things seriously, and the Nigerian electorate take their job seriously, hopefully we'll start a process of getting a leader that can reunite this country, fix our economy, and again, like I said, groom the next generation.
And perhaps take a second look at our human development indicators. I mean, we've talked a lot about the economy, yes. But there's also obviously health, there's education, human capital development, all of these work hand in hand.
We must have policy debates on these issues. Let Muhammad Buhari, who I assume is the president candidate for APC, sit down and tell us what he wants to do for the next 4 or 5 years. And let whoever comes from the PDP, let them sit down and debate it. You can moderate the debate. And let them tell Nigerians what they plan to do, and let us elect them on that basis. Let us forget this APC, PDP, those are just vehicles. Right. Let's look at the people and let's pick the best person we can pick.
Mustapha, thank you for your time today. Thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
It's my pleasure.
Mustapha Chike-Obi, Executive Vice Chairman, Alpha African Advisory.